Karina is the tribal chair of the Confederated Villages of Lejeune and the co-founder of Segurite Land Trust. She was born and raised in Oakland, the territory of the Huichin. She's an indigenous activist, an amazing human, an organizer that has worked on preserving and protecting the ancient burial sites of her ancestors in the Bay Area. She is the co-founder and lead organizer for Indian People for Organizing for Change, a small Native-run grassroots organization. And I just love her so much. She begins our series when she's available. And it's always a blessing to have Karina Gould in the room, to be in her presence. So thank you, Karina, for being here. And again, I apologize, folks, for the late start, but we are having some technical issues, and I'll talk about those in a minute. Thank you, Karina.
Good to be here, Cheryl. Good to be here, relatives. Good morning. It's not late enough in the year, so I could still say Happy New Year, right? And so it's so good to be here in a new year doing this good work together with all of you. And thank you, Cheryl, for inviting me to open up this space again. It's been an amazing ride that we've been on, and we're all so early in the year focusing and facing some of the things that we are working on together to change and hopefully making it a change in. You know, I'm talking about the fires that are happening both in LA, the fires that are happening at Moss Landing right now, the things that are going on that we're seeing our Earth calling out for us to make changes as human beings. And so we'll do the breath thing again, but I want to keep that in mind. I also want to put in the forefront, this ceasefire that for 15 months we've been praying for and in the streets for and working for with our Palestinian relatives and millions of people all over the world that that has happened and for a while. And so there's still work to be done. And and the transitions that we're about to see in this country this on Monday, and that is causing anxiety in people, and that we have to understand that we are stronger together to continue to do the work that our ancestors are calling us to do in this lifetime. So relatives, I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath, and as we take a deep breath, we'll let that breath out longer than we breathed in. So we'll breathe in for 6 and let out for 10. And while we're breathing out, we're going to let go of anything that is on our minds that's not going to allow us to focus today. So let's take a deep breath in and let it go. And as we take the next deep breath in, we're going to have in our minds to let go of any anxieties that are on any conversations that we had this morning that were not so good, any person that irritated us. We're going to let them go. We're going to let all of those things go. So we're going to take a deep breath in and we're going to let it go. We're going to thank our Mother Earth for us standing on her, sitting on her, whatever it is we're doing in whatever position today, for waking up and that we had this solid place to be today. We thank her for all of her many blessings. We ask for forgiveness for the things that human beings have done in a short period. We're going to take a deep breath in and we're going to let it go. Call on our water relatives, our cloud relatives, our rains, to continue to come and do their ancestral callings to bring us fresh waters for the next 7 generations and beyond. We ask for a special blessing and prayers for our rivers, our lakes, our creeks, our streams, our bays, our oceans. We ask that their bodies are cleaned and that there is room for our relatives' salmon to come back home and that we have fresh water for the next 7 generations and beyond. We take a deep breath in and we let it go. We pray to our wind relatives that bring in fresh air, that we bring in the good clouds to do rain. We that brings the gentle winds that pollinate our foods and our medicines. And we ask the winds to settle down in the Southern California, to give them time to breathe, to wash out that smoke, but also not to fan fires. We take a deep breath in and we let it go. We ask fire for a good relationship with them, relationship that people have had with them for millions and millions of years, to continue to bring light and warmth, but not to do this fast fire that runs through and creates devastation. We pray for those relatives that have lost their homes, that have lost their belongings, that have lost their loved ones. We pray for all of our relatives um, that are unhoused, those that are dealing with smoke inhalation, but those that are unhoused all over the place. We pray for those relatives, and we pray that we come together as human beings to realize that it is our responsibility to take care of those that have less. And we take a deep breath in and we let it go. We take a deep breath in for our own health, our own mental, spiritual, physical, and mental health. We ask our Creator, whoever that might be, to help to take care of us in this time, to help us to be strong and courageous, to do the work that we've been asked to do in this lifetime. And we take a deep breath in and we let it go. Let me take a last deep breath in for anything that you need a deep breath for today, anything that's going to get you through this long weekend, any good things that you need could come your way. We ask for abundance and blessings so that we could do the good things that we need to do. Take a deep breath in and let it go. Thank you, relatives. Thank you, Cheryl, for always inviting me. Have a wonderful, wonderful meeting, and I look forward to seeing
Thank
you all
you.
soon.
Thank you so much, Karina. It's always a blessing. And yeah, we have a lot to do in 2025. And Happy New Year to you. I have a little something for you next time I see you. Maybe I'll come by your office. But love you and
Love you.
Happy New Year. Thank you
Happy.
again.
Bye.
All right, welcome everyone to Climate and Education. We had a little bit of glitches this morning. Sadly, two people, they called in sick. This isn't a job, it's a volunteer opportunity. But sadly, two people are sick and aren't able to make it this morning. And that's Kitty Kelly Epstein and Nancy. Both are pretty sick, and so they won't be able to be here. Um, I'm going to talk for a few minutes, Annie, so just hold on. But welcome, everyone. This is the Climate and Education, our fifth virtual summit series, Climate Colonization, Rights for Humans and Nature, the fourth in the five-part series. And I'm Cheryl Davila, the founder of CEMTF and a former council member in the city of Berkeley. I'm on the Equity Summit Alliance, one of the co-founders of Mobilize Berkeley also. And so happy that UC Berkeley Cirque is here with us today. I'm also on the board recently, a board member of the Interfaith Council of Alameda County, and on the advisory committee for the network of elected officials and staff, on Friends of Adeline, a community-based organization, and on the KPFA local station board, which is interesting. So, as Karina said, we have to you know, the fires and the genocide are on our minds. So we need to pray for all those that are impacted by that. In 2025, I say, get ready, be prepared. But I don't know if we're all prepared, so we need to start trying to do that. I know I do. But we have to continue also to be out in the streets to make sure the genocide ends and to ensure that we get a ceasefire, it becomes a reality, the occupation ends, and be in solidarity for a free Palestine, a free Sudan, the Congo, Haiti, free us all from oppression, greed, racism, colonization, hatred, and bigotry, especially now that 45 is now 47. We have a lot to do, but I want to thank some of the folks for being here today, all of you for being here today. And a special shout out to the Planning and Logistics Committee and the Steering Committee, Jack and Karina and myself. And thank you to the speakers, Karina, who we just heard from. Helen is here, and Kitty is not, Nancy is not. And I want to thank Tiny, Jed, Kaspant, Alina, Shara, and Sharon. And we may have a special guest later, so I want to thank that person too. And I also want to thank you all for donating. We currently have 98 people registered for today. So that's really great. And you can always continue to donate at CEMTF.org. And I want to thank you all for the people that have been part of CEMTF organizing, because we, like I said, we're all volunteers. And I also want to thank the UC Berkeley Fellows who are here today. We were blessed again to have 4 fellows helping us out this year. Annie, Fatima, Sophia, and Nisa. They're all such amazing humans, and they're going to continue the work on updating the Alameda County scorecard. And they're also working on some other things, which we're going to debut in our May CEMTF general meeting. And we kicked off climate and education on Wednesday with Greg Hom, who spoke about slowing down slows misinformation. He's a librarian in the San Francisco Public Library, working as a program manager at the Environmental Center. And he gave a great, short, informative presentation. So today we're here to talk about climate and education. I'm excited. And climate is a region of the Earth having specified climate conditions, or it's the average course or condition in the weather at a place, usually over a period of years, as exhibited by temperature and wind and velocity and precipitation, and the prevailing set of conditions as temperature and humidity indoors, and the prevailing influence of environmental conditions characterizing a group or a period. And what is education? I know we'll hear from our speakers today, but education is the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction, especially at a school or university, or it's an enlightening experience. So we're in a heap of trouble, as I always say, and the heap keeps getting larger and larger. Sadly, this is the second time there were simultaneous fires in California, and just recently this morning, or yesterday, I believe it started, in Monterey, with lithium battery facility. So that's just outrageous. And the fires in Los Angeles County, Riverside County, San Bernardino, and Ventura. My thoughts and prayers are with all those folks out there, and including the folks in Palestine. and for all the martyrs. And so I'm just keeping hope alive for a ceasefire. The temperatures keep rising everywhere, and the police violence and all these things. They've had 3 successful recalls, and we're losing our rights, and now we have a fascist coming into the White House. So look out, we're in a crisis. We still have unhoused folks that are being treated inhumanely. The mental health and the fentanyl crisis is rising. So all these wars must end, and we must end the wars within ourselves in order to truly save us from the climate crisis and to survive 45, now 47. So I just lost my place, unfortunately. But anyway, I was going to say, uh, so sit back and ponder all that. Get your coffee, tea, water, your breakfast, and let's hear from our speakers today to talk about climate and education. And it will be another enlightening experience. So thank you all for being here. And Annie, who is one of our amazing fellows, will introduce our next speaker.
Hi, thank you, Cheryl and Karina, for a great introduction. First up, we have Helen Fitzmaurice, a coordinator for Oakland Teachers Advancing Climate Action. They are going to be presenting on building a family of educators committed to climate justice. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie, and hi, everybody. I'm happy to be with you today, and this is a session focused on education. So I'm gonna actually ask you not to get your breakfast and to get a pen and a piece of paper instead. And you can get your coffee and your breakfast in just a minute. But before I get started with my talk about OTACA, Oakland Teachers Advancing Climate Action, I'm going to ask us all to sort of take a minute and do a little bit of reflection. And in particular, I'm going to skip my first slide and go back to it in a second. I want us to take a few minutes to answer these questions. So this is a research framework, but it's also just a good framework for life and reflection from this guy I work with at UC Berkeley named Thomas Phillip. And my question is, it's the what, the for whom, with whom, and how. And so I want you to take a second and think about climate change education. What and for whom is climate change education for? With whom do we need to engage in this work together? And how should climate education be? So I'm going to actually not talk for the next 3 minutes. And I literally, whether you're a typer, a writer, whether you're going to draw out your answer in a picture, I want you to answer these 4 questions for yourself: the what, the for whom, the with whom, and the how. And I'm going to ask some people to share. So pausing. And if you need to grab your coffee, you can. All right, and take another 60 seconds. Try to get to all 4 of these questions. It's really important that we not just focus on the how, what it should, look like in terms of lessons or experiences, but that we think about what it's for, who it's for, who needs to be part of the building process. I'm going to ask everyone to pick one of these 4 questions. And Cheryl and Jack, can you confirm that people are allowed to type into the chat?
Yes, they are,
Okay, great.
as far as I know.
Um, and I'm going to ask everyone to just share one of your reflections. And let's take a minute and read what other folks have put here. So I see one person has shared. I appreciate everyone should pay their Shumi land tax. I'm going to wait until more people share. How? Avoid technical language, not the doom and gloom. Appreciate that. And I'm wondering to work with people who have survived climate disasters or are dealing with the strongest impacts. I really appreciate that. Lifting up Black and Indigenous leaders and working with disabled leaders, queer people, unhoused people. I appreciate that answer. It should be decolonized, should prioritize frontline communities. It's for everyone and needs to be in nature, which humans are a part of. I can't read that fast, but experiential and hands-on. K-12 students, university students. I appreciate state and national leaders in education. It's not just about educating students, it's about educating educators. With whom the government. Yeah. So I appreciate all of these answers, and I don't have the right answer, but I think it's important to keep asking ourselves these questions. I wanted to share one thing before I get started with my talk. So, we're all on Zoom this morning, and it feels like an emergency, and it is an emergency, but every day people in our area are fighting back. And so this is just a picture at Chevron in Richmond this morning. And, as we think about climate change education, we need to think about what everyone in our area is doing about this climate emergency. So I am going to talk to you today about a program I work with. So I'm a former high school science teacher, and I work with a beautiful group of educators, mostly OUSD teachers, but we also work with some West Contra Costa teachers, some Berkeley Unified teachers, some San Leandro teacher, one Fremont teacher, one Bay Point teacher. And I want to talk to you about what it means to try to build a family of educators committed to climate justice. And then I'm going to begin that by sharing some things I've heard about the questions I just asked you, not from teachers, but from sort of the public at large or people I've had conversations with. So one thing that I've heard is that climate change education is really for the world. It's not just for K-12 students, but that it's so that they can save us, right? So somebody told me, like, I kind of ran the numbers through my head, and we have 400,000 kids graduating from high school in California every year. It's just pure mobilization. Like, these kids can go and change the world. I've read research articles suggesting that just by taking one class in college, students, individuals, reduce their personal carbon footprint by 20%, which is actually a pretty big number. I've also heard this, and I'll say this is from a climate scientist, and you can decide how you feel about this quote, but like, isn't it too late to be educating students? Shouldn't we just be educating their parents instead? And I'm gonna suggest that this view that climate change education is about mitigation and stopping climate change is a little bit short-sighted. Because most K-12 students already know about climate change, right? And they know about environmental racism because they live it, right? This is an old snapshot, but it's not about this week and what's happening in LA, but every year students miss school days because of wildfires. The bottom map, I think most of you on this call will recognize where it's a picture of, but it's the green and red and yellow represent OUSD student asthma rates. And you can see, the red is high asthma rates and the green is low asthma rates. And you can see basically because of a legacy of environmental racism, that there's a very clear dividing line in which students experience like direct health disparities due to where the freeways are, where our fossil fuel emitting freeways are. Students, even those who aren't directly impacted or who don't realize they're directly impacted by climate change or environmental racism, also know about it. We can't protect them from that knowledge because they live in the world. They've heard about it from friends and family. They have stayed up all night watching YouTube videos or TikTok videos, kind of being horrified. And public health researchers have found that about 75% of Gen Zers across the US, and that's including in conservative states where we think that, fewer people believe that climate change is a problem, say that climate change has an impact on their mental health, like on a weekly basis. And so I think it's our job as educators to support students making sense of that, both in terms of their facts and in terms of emotions. And I think it's also important to remember that kids are really powerful. So this is my students actually in Pittsburgh, California. This is an older photo at this point, but they were part of the group of folks who stopped the Westpac facility from coming into Pittsburgh and opening up a crude oil facility. They went to city council meetings. They took air quality measurements. They participated in marches. They canvassed. Students can make a tangible political difference too. And they can learn from doing that. The next year, these same kids in this photograph said, okay, misfits, air quality was a good issue to work on, but here are the things we want to fix about our school. We want more computer access after school. We want there to be different sort of class selection policies, and they use the same tactics to actually organize change that was more local to their lives, or that seemed more local to their lives at our high school, and they changed school policies. And so I realize now I have like 5 minutes left and I haven't even got to teachers. So I'll just end it when I need to end it. But climate change education needs to be centered in climate justice. And I don't have the best, I think all of our understandings of what climate justice is always evolving. I really right now like Isha Clarke's quote. Isha Clark is a youth climate leader in Oakland, which is climate justice is about completely reimagining the way we live on this planet. And it's about collective liberation and dismantling systems of oppression in every way that they exist. It's not just about stopping emitting fossil fuels, because we can't do that without totally changing our society. We've also sort of been thinking through the years about what that means in terms of education. And we've changed it a lot of times. And if you ask me next week, I might give you a different answer. But right now, we're really thinking, what does that mean? It's centered around asset, not deficit, not look at these poor victims based stories of community action. So look at environmental justice victories that people are winning for themselves and their communities. Examining and having frank conversations about positionality. Honoring multiple ways of knowing, so not just hard science, but people's personal stories, indigenous stories, other cultural stories that help us understand our climate past, that help us understand how we should live in the world. Examining structures of oppression. Several of them were mentioned in the chat when I asked you what climate change education should be about, and taking action towards a more just future. So why formal K-12 educators? And you can probably hear the soundtrack to my neighborhood in the background. But I think, I don't totally disagree with the person who said we have 400,000 kids graduating high school in California every year. And there are a lot of really great informal educators who are working to educate students, K-12 students, university students, and people who are lifelong learners about climate change. But if we can get justice-centered climate change education into K-12 schools, we have the ability to really magnify our impact. And we have the ability to work with students who might not have the opportunity to engage in informal learning. I would love to talk to people more about who those students might be at a later date, but I won't go into it because I realize I'm running a little bit short on time. But what does it look like to actually support K-12 teachers to do this? Because I can tell you, as a primarily high school physics teacher who took almost no social science in college, who hadn't studied air quality or climate change in college. And the background right here is the PG&E facility in Pittsburgh that people wanted to turn into a crude oil facility, that I felt really lonely in trying to support my students' learning. And so, if you imagine you're a single teacher in a school where nobody else is teaching about climate justice, and maybe your principal is sort of saying you need to focus on the standards and these kids' test scores, that you might feel kind of stressed, right? And there are a lot of reasons that doing this by yourself as an educator is really hard, right? There's teacher bandwidth. There's a dearth of justice-focused climate curriculum that's changing now. But I think it's hard to find, and it's especially hard to find curriculum that meets your specific students' needs and that has connections to your students' community. You might not know the knowledge yourself. And so what OTACA, Oakland Teachers Advancing Climate Action, is trying to do is to help teachers who want to engage in climate justice education find a community of other teachers who want to do that. And so we do that in a couple ways. We do that by giving teachers stipends to acknowledge that figuring out what climate justice teaching looks like in their classrooms is a lot of work. We support them in location-specific student research and action and project-based learning, and just finding each other and realizing they're not the only person, as well as content knowledge. Now it's advancing automatically, and local community knowledge. So this group was founded by, we're in our 5th year. We're founded by a group of teachers who essentially kept bumping into each other at Neo-Colonialism protests, who formed an environmental justice caucus within OEA. And this is a group that's really meant to support teachers wherever they are in their learning about what climate justice means in bringing that forward. And we work with all sorts of teachers. We work with kindergarten teachers up through 12th grade teachers. We work with librarians. We work with special education case managers. And we work with teachers who have all sorts of different knowledge, right? All sorts of different places, who are in all sorts of different places in their understanding of what climate justice means, and who have all sorts of different content knowledge. And, you know, a lot of people have said, well, wouldn't it be easier if you just focused on 6th grade teachers? But they wouldn't be able to learn as much from each other. So I'm going to skip over what that can look like, or what sort of structural supports, but go to what that can look like at different grade levels. A lot of people think that elementary school is too early for climate justice, and it's not. You know, one way that you can have students engage in climate justice and even in understanding, you know, colonization was something that caused climate change is having them learn about contemporary Indigenous people. So this picture on the right, you know, this was like a 4th grade project. They first researched Sigorate, actually. And then they had to each research different Indigenous groups across the country to learn about what are they doing now in support of climate justice that adults in Oakland should learn about. And they made this presentation to their parents, right? So that's something that elementary students can do. At middle school, they can start learning about historical racism here. And, you know, I would say this middle school teacher had his students really wanted to focus on plastics in school lunch. And so they learned all sort of the whole cycle of plastic creation. And they learned about, well, okay, in our place, you know, in the Bay Area, where are there recycling centers? You know, when we're thinking about waste, who is exposed to the end emissions of that waste? And, you know, as 7th graders, they learned about historical redlining and saw where recycling facilities in the Bay Area are today. And then in high school, we've had students essentially leading projects. You know, I'm going to focus on this project on the left, where we have this high school teacher who essentially every semester, his students work with a community partner who's trying to affect some kind of climate action. And the students and the community partner plan out the project. The teacher basically is acting in a facilitator role, asking questions, you know, what do you plan to do next? What is your actual goal? You know, is that an achievable goal? And students are really leading the way. And I'm going to end in just a second, but I think my last bit is kind of a so what. And this is from Jack. He said, our audience is generally people who understand the climate crisis and are looking for ways to address it. So that's you. And so I'm going to give you some so whats. One thing you can do as you're talking to educators, as you're talking to people, as you are engaging as an educator yourself, because if you are engaged in climate justice work, you are educating people in your community, people in your family, is to refine your own understanding of what climate justice is and to center climate justice in climate change education, to not just focus on this is how the greenhouse effect works and this is the emissions pie chart. Not that those things aren't important, but they can't be the sole focus. The second thing you can do is you can hold your school districts accountable to school board resolutions geared towards supporting teacher professional development around climate change. So OUSD, Berkeley Unified, Fremont Unified, and I believe now Piedmont Unified and Hayward Unified all have school district resolutions saying that they will support climate change education. Berkeley is Berkeley, Hayward, and Fremont currently have staff supporting this. And Hayward and Fremont are eliminating those staff positions next year, supposedly. And so, you know, push your school district to actually make it someone's job to support teachers in doing this work. And the last way is to be a part of the climate justice education extended family. So Oakland Teachers Advancing Climate Action does not do this work by ourselves. We have had help from so many people who've, you know, been, you know, either one-off webinar partners or, you know, led a full day workshop with our students, or in the case of Community Resources for Science, have really sort of held our hand through this process the whole way. Teachers and students want to be more engaged in and learn more stories about people who are doing climate justice work in the East Bay. And so if you're doing that work, reach out to educators you know, or reach out to me if you want to be connected to educators. Working with community partners makes a real difference to K-12 students. It helps them feel that their education matters. It helps them feel more connected to their community as a whole. And so with that, I'm just going to say thanks.
Thank you. That was amazing, truly amazing. And thank you for all you do and all you did for the students that you taught. I could imagine you're an amazing teacher. Okay. And sorry, I got a note on my screen I had to pay attention to. I don't know what I don't understand, but whatever. Uh, yeah, that was great. And you know, just a fun fact is that CEMTF, well, Cheryl Davila, as a former council member, got introduced the climate literacy people to the school board. So Berkeley Unified School Board. So I'm so happy that I made that connection. And yeah, they shouldn't, it's sad that, you know, 47 is making people go back on their climate goals and DEI, all these things. So we gotta, you know, make sure that we stay on top of it and keep them on the right path to not to eliminate these positions. So thank you. Omawale has a question, if you can make it very quick.
Yeah, just wanted to know at what point, meaning at what grade level, do you think it's appropriate to begin to ask children to intercede with government committees, council persons, boards of supervisors? Have you, because your final comment seemed to be going in that direction, but I didn't know if you had a specific grade level that you thought that might be an appropriate step in that educational process.
I would say that it really depends on the teacher. We work with really new teachers and we work with veteran teachers, and I would say any grade level, if the teacher is really in touch with students' home communities and understands how to facilitate that kind of action well, that can be a positive thing. You know, we have had kindergartners sending pictures, we've had third graders writing letters to our mayor over the course of different mayors, and you know, fifth graders peer editing the third grade letters in buddy classes. But I think it's something that we're really focused on developing teachers' capacity over time. And so it might not be something that a teacher is ready to support in their classroom their first go around. Yeah, but it can happen in kindergarten.
Okay, thank you. And Kim has her hand up. Go ahead, Kim, you unmute yourself.
Hey, Cheryl. I may not be able to stay on this, and I didn't really have a question. I just have some comments. And I just wanted to reflect in this discussion on education that, you know, Native history and culture are not taught in our public schools in any meaningful way. Most of the time, it is taught through a narrative of white privilege, and they will minimize genocide. You know, Governor Newsom just signed into law AB 1821, where our public schools are now mandated to teach about the brutal history of the California missions, as well as the gold rush. And you know, its impact, you know, for us as Native people, as because I am a California Indian myself, its impact on our mental health, and looking at the history of European farming systems that are extractive and exploitive here in this land, and thinking about the gold rush and their destruction of our rivers, of our creeks, of our streams. And so, you know, that's how I would like to see us tied, that the climate education tied into what happened to our stewardship. And of course, we're working very hard to maintain and get back some land and stewardship. I'm also a board member of the Segurate Land Trust. I am a Tuolumne Miwok. My people lived in Yosemite and the surrounding area, and of course we were evicted from Yosemite. So when we keep talking about the word sweeps, we got swept too. So I just wanted to bring that up. And then I also wanted to say, you know, when talking about this settler colonialism, which is white supremacy, you know, are teachers going to be comfortable or uncomfortable calling out settler colonialism, especially in a time when there is such this attack on, you know, wokeness? So I just wanted to bring that up, that, you know.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Go ahead, Helen. You want to say something real quick?
Yeah, I think really quick, I thank you for sharing that, Kim. And I know a lot of our teachers are interested in becoming more educated themselves so that they are comfortable teaching about the sort of history of genocide in our country. A lot of them didn't learn about it in school themselves. When I said our teachers are starting from a lot of different places, some of them are very comfortable talking about problems related to white supremacy and historical racism and all those things. And some, you know, come to our workshops and say, oh, I've never been able to define that for myself before today. Like, I need to tell my family members about it. And then when we ask them, and we do follow-up interviews every year, how do you address this in your classroom? Sometimes the answer is, I'm not ready to do that this year. And we are really invested, and we're not saying, oh, that's okay, but we're really invested in working with these teachers to build where they are from year to year over, because we don't want people who are so uncomfortable that they can't even talk about it with their family members to be teaching about it in class. We want them to become comfortable and then next year to start teaching it in their class. And different people have different philosophies about that, but we really view teachers as learners over time.
Thank you again. Whoops. Yeah, thank you again so much, Helen. I really appreciate it. And next, we're going to continue on with our programming. We have Nisa introducing, or maybe Fatima introducing, I'm not sure which, but whoever's kind is. Since we had a skip in the schedule, go ahead, Fatima. Thank you so much. You look great. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Cheryl. Thank you so much, Helen. That was amazing. Thank you, Cheryl. My name is Fatima. I will be introducing the next speaker, Chini Munson. He's from the Climate Scope Project Sierra Club, and will be speaking on supporting California climate literacy and justice education. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I know you've been sitting in front of a screen for a while. If you want to like take a quick little stretch or move around, I think you should. I'll be talking for about 20 minutes or so, and then I have to leave. But my name's Cheney Munson. It's really nice to be here. And so I'm the chair of the Sierra Club Climate Literacy Committee. A new position for me about 4 months ago. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But basically, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I want to hear a little bit, if you're willing, either in the chat or unmute yourself to tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're coming from. My plan is to also give the Thanksgiving address, the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address. I want to talk a little bit about the state of national and California climate education ecosystem, talk about some of the legal frameworks available to us, and then what you or people you know can do to support climate literacy and justice education in California. And if you're willing, take a quick survey about how you might want to be involved. I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Let me get, okay. Okay. Fatima, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see the screen? Okay, great. Thank you. I'm probably preaching the choir. You probably know her already. Her name is Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. She helped edit the book All We Can Save, and she also just came out with a book called What If We Get It Right, but she's popularized this idea of a triple Venn diagram about thinking about what brings you joy, what your talents and resources are, and what solutions or work needs to be done. And kind of in that triple overlap is what your contributions can and should be to climate justice and the climate movement. A little bit about me, and then I would love to hear a little bit about which parts of your identity are kind of resonating most for you right now, if you want to start thinking about that. I love being outside. I'm in Oakland, and I go to Redwood Regional to run with my dog Juno, who I'm obsessed with. I love cooking and kind of hosting dinners with friends and family. This is my wife on the Mendocino coast. We love getting outside. I play lots of music. I have a musician community. And after 6.5 years of struggling with infertility, my wife is finally pregnant, and we're expecting a baby in April, and I'm very excited about that. So some of my identities that I'm coming to right now is a teacher and educator, a husband, a father-to-be, an uncle, a son, a brother, a musician. I love the outdoors. I love food. If you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to pause share for a second. If you wouldn't mind just putting in the chat either an identity or identities that you're bringing to this space right now. I would love to hear, I don't know if it's like mainly educators here, is it politicians? Like, I'd love to hear about the work that you do. Like, where are you coming from? If you are an educator, I'd love to hear either content areas or grade levels you work with. You can also tell me where you're from. I just love to get a little pulse of who's in this space right now. Jack, retired engineer, climate activist, thank you. We need lots of engineers. UC Berkeley, university staff, thank you, Jed. Environmental planner, thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for being here. If you're at all willing to put your webcam on, I would love to be able to see your faces. If not, I totally understand. Climate Action Corps, thank you, Patrick. Sierra, neurology physician assistant, thank you. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but as you know, like no matter what work you do, and this is what we try to kind of talk to students about, no matter what work you do, you can bring a lens of climate and climate justice into it. Aaron, oh, hi, Aaron. Nice to see you. Cheryl, former council member, thank you. Okay. I really appreciate everyone participating in the chat. So that's a little bit about me personally, just really quickly professionally. I taught ELA in New York and New Jersey for 8 years. I was a middle school English teacher. I was a literacy staff developer, and I worked with teachers and educational leaders through Columbia University for a number of years. I became their sustainability and climate education specialist. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I started going out on my own. And now I work kind of locally or volunteer locally with the Sierra Club as the climate literacy chair. That's kind of SF Bay area. I work with 10 Strands, which is kind of a California-based organization that tries to coordinate environmental literacy and environmental justice education work. And then I work nationally through the Green Schools National Network. With Green Schools, we're starting some really exciting work with Los Angeles County Office of Education, especially because of the fires. There's both an opportunity and some urgency to figure out ways to help lift up climate-ready schools, which includes climate justice education. I'm also working with Portland Public Schools to help them implement their climate justice policy, which is one of the most comprehensive in the United States. I would love to start with the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address. I'm going to just read it out to you. Our
Yeah.
mother, the earth, for she gives us everything that we need for life. The waters of the world that nurture life for all beings, and all the fish life in the water, the vast fields of plant life, the berries, the trees, and the medicine herbs of the world, the edible plants we harvest from the garden, especially the Three Sisters, the beautiful animal life of the world, and all the birds who move and fly about over our heads, the powers we know as the four winds, who purify the air we breathe and help to bring the change of seasons, our grandfathers, the thunder beings who live in the west with their lightning and thundering voices, our eldest brothers, the sun, our oldest grandmother, the moon, and the stars, who are spread across the sky like jewelry, the enlightened teachers who have come to help throughout the ages. We now turn our thoughts to the Creator, our Great Spirit, and send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Now our minds are one. One of the things I'm in a braiding sweetgrass for educators, kind of short little mini series class, and one thing they recommend educators and others do is to start meetings with the Thanksgiving address to try to start to tell a story of interconnection and honor different ways of knowing and a kinship with non-humans and humans. And so you might consider first reading Braiding Sweetgrass. I have both the adult and the young adult version, but it is something to consider to bring some of that thinking and way of knowing into the space that you work and the space that you teach. I'm sorry. It's really.
That's okay. While you're pausing, I'm just gonna say, when you started that Thanksgiving address, I have this cross on my wall that's been on there for like 5 or plus years. And
Mm,
it came flying down, knocked down my two indigenous, well, feathers that I got from an indigenous leader. So that was some seriously impactful words you just said there. It's giving me chills. I'm just saying. I just had to
yeah,
share that because that was some intense, it really, it was intense. So thank you for that.
yeah. Okay. So climate literacy as defined by the Sierra Club is kind of the cause of climate change, its potential for harm, what is required to avoid significant climate destabilization, actions needed to ensure a livable future, and the key people and institutions involved in those actions. Within this understanding of climate literacy, especially according to NOAA, who just released an updated climate literacy guide, is a centering of equity and justice, a joyful and positive vision of a possible future, different ways of knowing, and an interdisciplinary approach. I am working with the Sierra Club to start to try to change some of that language within some of these key understandings. If you, Helen spoke really beautifully of this before. Deb Morrison and a number of her colleagues have released kind of a climate justice education framework with 12 different dimensions of like the what, how, and who of climate justice learning. I will put this link in the chat, but just know that there's lots of smart thinking about what climate justice education can and should look like. And that is a part of climate literacy. It's not separate from, it is an integral part, and it should be centered. I think it's important when you're talking about climate literacy to also talk about climate ready schools. So climate literacy is kind of the curriculum and instruction side of the puzzle. It needs to be thought of as part of the campus. So that is the school buildings as well as the school grounds. Thinking about using the grounds and the buildings as a teaching tool, like Helen was talking about, as well as a community and culture of kind of walking and talking about prioritizing sustainability and resilience and justice within partnership to community-based organizations. I think Otaka is a really good example of the implementation of climate justice education, climate literacy, and working towards climate-ready schools. I'll put this link in the chat. This is a helpful visual that you might show to educators, politicians, leaders, thinking about what a vision of a green school would look like if it were actually implemented. And this is when I send you the link, you can kind of click over each of these little spaces and it'll talk about kind of school gardens and clean electric HVAC units and charging for electric vehicles and partnerships with nature-based organizations and a pond where students are collecting data. It's a really beautiful vision. And it's important to share this vision, even if it feels really far off, so people can kind of get a sense of what they are working towards. For literacy, we want to think about every high school graduate graduating environmentally and climate literate with TK through 12th grade competencies. We want students to have the skills, actions, and knowledge to have a pathway towards a career in a green economy. We want literacy that's infused with justice and equity. And we want to give students transformational experiences with the natural world and built environment. For school buildings, the vision is that all school buildings will be low or no carb with healthy indoor spaces and clean air and clean water, that all school grounds are green with shade and forests and gardens. that buildings and grounds are connected to learning, shaped by student leaders, and integrated into the broader community, and that every student has access to freshly prepared, locally grown food at school. 10 Strands, which is a nonprofit organization in California, is organizing a bunch of different nonprofits at the national and California level who all have kind of a huge amount of experience and knowledge in implementing these across districts and schools. So one concrete way to get involved is to get involved with 10 Strands and the California Environmental Literacy Initiative. If you are interested in that, you can email me. I will give you my email address at the end of this. The climate education ecosystem there's many different players, and often they are siloed. So part of the work that I'm trying to do with Sierra Club, 10 Strands, and Green Schools National Network is to bring some cohesion and help people and these organizations work a little bit more in concert with one another. There's some legal frameworks that you should be aware of. And because of time, I'm not going to read this out to you, but there are bills on the books that require the environmental principles and concepts to be taught, grades 1 through 12, that have allocated funds for the creation and not yet implementation for climate justice education in schools, and for the teaching and science class of climate change. So just, it's helpful to be aware that there are some amounts of legal frameworks. While they're not enough, they provide a starting point. Like Helen mentioned, there are at least 7 and a growing number of districts that have passed climate resolutions: Oakland, Berkeley, Fremont, Piedmont, Livermore, LAUSD, and Petaluma have all passed climate resolutions, in large part because of the work that Helen and others had done in concert with other students, educators, and climate activists at a local level. If you are from a district that has not yet passed a climate resolution, we have lots of materials and examples of how to help pass those climate resolutions. What I'm working towards now in my being the chair of the Climate Literacy Committee is trying to work from policy and resolutions towards implementation and telling a story of what successes are already happening. So some things that you can do or people you know could do to help move climate literacy and climate justice education forward is to help pass a climate resolution at your district if it's not passed already. If a climate resolution is passed, and Helen mentioned this, is to demand and push for a part-time or ideally full-time climate or sustainability specialist, to push for funding to be allocated for professional development for teachers so that there's funding for organizations like Otaka. Explore climate action plans of cities. There are billions of dollars throughout California that are being allocated for climate action plans. One thing you can do is ask them how much money is going towards children. A lot of climate action plans have left out children, and 20% of Californians are children, are 18 years and younger. So I was with a group of leaders at the beginning of this week, and one of the women there said that it doesn't have to be there's existing money going towards climate resilience. Part of what, at least for schools and education, is figuring out how to help allocate maybe 5% or 2% of that money towards children. So exploring in your county, in your city, in your towns, where the money is and how you might advocate for it being allocated, a portion of it, towards schools and towards children and teachers. Tools, I have been working towards curating tools and digital resources for students. It's a website called the Climascope Project. It makes it more easy and joyful to bring in climate and environmental justice into the classroom. And then we are looking for stories of students, teachers, leaders, schools, and districts who are positive outliers, so kind of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And we are looking to tell those stories, map them, and share them more widely. There's a organization called Climb Time in Washington that basically has a map. I'm trying to get this started with SF Bay Area, but mapping out where great work is happening. So if you know of great work that's happening, you can let me know and we can interview them. We can help tell their story and put them on the map so that other people can be inspired by them. So you can pressure your local school districts to commit to climate education through climate resolutions, push for funding part-time or full-time role. You can push for allocating existing funds towards professional development. You can get in touch with me to think about if you know of good climate solution resources, you can send them to me and we can help get them out into classrooms throughout the country. You can tell me about students, teachers, schools, and districts who are doing good work so that people can visualize what good climate literacy and climate justice education looks like. Through 10 Strands, there's something called the CYCP program, which partners experienced adults with climate advocacy with a high school student and kind of a mentorship program. And that's been a very exciting, effective program that's gotten a lot of great work done in schools and districts. And if any of this sounds interesting, I can tell you more about how to get involved with 10 Strands or the Sierra Club Climate Literacy Group. And I'm going to have to go very, very soon. But if you are all interested, I'm going to drop a survey in the chat, and it's probably the best, easiest way for us to stay in touch. Is there anybody who has any quick, I'll maybe take one or two questions. I'm sorry I talk so much.
No, you did an amazing job. Thank you so much. You gave us a lot of good information. And I love the map, you know, that's a cool tool and a chance to tell stories. So thank you.
Yeah. And please,
I don't see any hand raised.
yeah, if oh, I just sent that to a direct message. Yep, I'm gonna put it in the chat for everyone. I will also put I'll put my email in the chat as well. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy days and schedules to think about this work. It's the only thing that keeps me going is to connect with like-minded people. So I just really have a huge amount of gratitude for everyone who showed up today and who listened to me.
And thank you.
All right,
There's
Cheryl.
Robert has his hand up.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Make it quick, please.
I just want to say that I think the Spirit supports your work, and that's all I will have to say.
I appreciate that very much, Robert.
Thank you.
Let me just, sorry.
And congratulations on your new arrival.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I did, especially with what Kim said. There's an amazing project called Project 562 by Matika Wilbur, who's an Indigenous woman from Seattle who sold all of her things and traveled around the country to document the 562 governmentally recognized tribes, and has a beautiful and difficult history of the wide variety of Indigenous tribes throughout the country. And it's a beautiful book and it has educational resources. So I really recommend checking that out. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you so much for having me, Cheryl. Thank you everyone for listening.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Patrick had his hand up, but I'll take his question. Maybe we can figure out how to answer it. But
okay, yeah, that sounds good. Patrick, if you want,
sure. Hi.
Go ahead, Patrick.
So climate literacy and then climate job skills training. like
Yes.
transitioning youth into workforce development. What kind of work in that arena can you mention for, especially in my case, Climate Action Corps, Conservation Corps, fellows like that?
Yeah, so anything to do with CTE, so career technical education, that is kind of the big bucket within education. And then there's a great organization called Climate Base, which is kind of you probably know about it already, but figuring out ways to connect either adults or students to Climate Base, which is kind of the, I think, largest and most well-known kind of portal for jobs with a climate lens, with a job board, the host of San Francisco Climate Week, and they do the Climate Base Fellowship, which is a really amazing fellowship organization that helps network, provide skills, curriculum, and knowledge for students and for adults. That's my short version of that. But
All right, great.
careers
Thank
need
you
to
so
be
much.
a key part of it. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
I
No,
got
but
you. Thank you very
if
much,
we can
Shane.
get your slides, that would be amazing. If you
I
could send
will,
them,
yes.
and
I
we'll
think
send it
Karina
out.
has them, but I will send
Okay.
a public link for them.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye,
Have a
everyone.
blessed day. Thank
Bye.
you. So hopefully, let me see. We had a little glitch in our system today, with folks being sick and not being able to be here. Kitty, Kelly Epstein, and Nancy. So Tiny, who is supposed to start later, is starting now. So Tiny, you'll have a little bit more time, although we'll have a break in between. So for 5 minutes, but you're gonna have a little bit more time, and then or we can let the 11:25 folks go a little earlier too. So take it away, Tiny. You don't need any introduction. You can introduce yourself. So go ahead, my sister. I love you. Thank you for being here.
I love you too. I might not be able to go beyond 11, just because yeah, but we'll see. Whatever works out. Thank you, relatives, for welcoming me in, and thank you, Cheryl, for all your work always in bringing this liberation and the liberation discussion together in this very difficult time. Anti-social workers and case manglers call me crazy, lazy, dumb, and a bum, because my knowledge don't come from the institution. I'm a poverty scholar. That houseless mama, that houseless daughter, all those people they don't want to see, never want to be, look away from we. What you gonna do? Oakland, Berkeley, Frisco, LA, Vallejo, West we. Shout out to Kim on there. So I'm a poet, and but first of all, I'm a daughter. I'm a daughter of a houseless disabled, mixed race, Afro-Boricua, ghetto scholar, my mama D, for without whom there'd be no me. And when I talk about education, I need to always bring her in. An ibaye to my mom, because homelessness kills, sweeps kill, evictions kill. Evictions are elder and child abuse, and they actually interrupt education. So it's really important to name these things. As we're talking about education, to me, it's at the crux of intersectionality, really. How can you talk about education on quote unquote climate change, or what I would call a colonial education on colonial created climate terrorism, and Ibaye to Benali, because we know corporate climate terrorists also kill. But how can you talk about these things without talking about our ancestors, our mamas and our papas, and the people who gave us life? But see, the colonizer's education doesn't ever want you to talk about the people you came from, because part of the basis, if not all of the basis of colonial education, is to rip you away from who made you, who gave you life, who gave you spirit, and who our cultures and our communities came from. That's how they can create, and I mean, when I say they, I'll bring it home. So-called UC Berkeley and UZLA, as I call it. I'll explain that in a minute. Stanford, Columbia, named after the colonizer, Temple, you name it. Most of these institutions of so-called higher learning are created by eugenicists, land stealers, and land occupiers. So when we talk about climate change and education, to me, you have to talk about decolonization. One can't exist without the other. We have to uproot the original theft before we can talk about the current theft. We have to interrupt the lie of so-called private property and public property and who has education and who doesn't, and who's a teacher and who's not, before we can even go forward with what's necessary to heal and take care of not only Mama Earth, but our mamas and our ancestors right now. Anthropology, ethnography, psychology, the study about us, without us, our spirits, our cultures, our traditions through your lens, deconstructing our struggle while our communities are dismantled and left in rubble. Acquired with AKK-demic privilege, linguistic domination mess, long ago sorted and separated in American school systems and the myth of inclusion and the cult of independence. How are you going to fly to the exotic lands, to fetish of Bangladesh, Kansas, and Oakland, but not so much as slice off a piece of your academic privilege or access? Come back and create an A on your thesis and final tests without us, about us. Well, I've got a new form of fellowship. It's a mothership, a brothership, a sistership. It's called Poverty Scholarship. And it is created and canonized and lifted up and loved up by the people who are continually studied and deconstructed for the sake of a colonial market-based education. So that's another poem. I wondered if I have sharing abilities. I think I do, right? Okay, great.
Yes.
All right. I wanted to bring up, I don't know if I can do this, but let me try. Let me try relatives. It's usually hard for me to do both at the same time. Here we go. So what I just read is a poem from Poverty Scholarship. And as you can see, the cover, I want to spend a minute on this today. The cover is intentionally the people taking back the institution. And that Greco-Roman building, as we all are very familiar with and are desensitized to, are the ones that are on these campuses. I had to go to Leland Stanford's house, aka Stanford, last week, which is always kind of a terrifying experience for me, frankly, where you go through this plantation essentially, and then a golf course, and all of these other, examples of extreme wealth hoarding and land stealing. And you see all these Greco-Roman places. But one of the things that always trips me out about that particular campus is the sheer amount of Mama Earth that they have stolen and occupied. Moekma Mama Earth, I might add, right? And any of the other ancestors that we don't know the names of, to create essentially a place that perpetuates the same extractive systems that Turtle Island was stolen by. But what's important to know about Stanford and a lot of these schools, in addition to having all these Greco-Roman buildings and stolen land, and that those buildings and land are named after the stealers and the eugenicists and the occupiers, is that they continue to be supported by them, right? And that the absolute violence of extraction, not only from Turtle Island and across Mama Earth, but also from Palestine and West Papua and beyond, all comes under the grid of so-called science. But the other extraction that happens that people don't, that's the one people maybe know more about. The one people don't know so much about is the extraction of poor people's knowledge, the extraction of poor people's bodies and lives as a product of education. And what I'm talking about is I'm talking about the poem that I just read and the ways that our lives as poor people, indigenous peoples, are deconstructive and never given agency in our own storytelling and our creating. And what's important about that is to create a market about us without us, then perpetuates the continuation of that market. So that's how you have corporate media and even so-called progressive independent media staffed and created by middle-class people who've never missed a meal, as my mama would say. That's how the knowledge systems, or what I call the research industrial complex, continues to take in thousands of dollars to research poor people in our many different iterations, but never so much as kick down a piece of that resource that they sort of took in to figure us out, or to so-called count us or quantify us. Now, no disrespect, a lot of times these research modalities can be used by some of us for poor people to kind of look at what's happening to us, but most of the time not. And most of the time, the product of research and the product of thesis creation and white science, as I call it, and all of these systems continue to perpetrate about us without us. So in our work with Poverty Scholarship, we actually set about creating our own pedagogy, if you will. I don't like to use the P word very often because it perpetrates more of the othering of this colonial language of us. But it's important to note that we as poor and houseless indigenous peoples, disabled peoples, have our own knowledge. Shout out to my brother Leroy Moore, Crip-Hop Nation. Shout out to Auntie Kim Dale Campo and Karina Gould and all the warriors creating knowledge that they always had, but creating spaces and places of knowledge to take back Mama Earth and land back. But I also want to lift up my houseless brothers and sisters. It doesn't help us to count us. It doesn't help us to put together all the different quantifications of our homelessness. We already know that. What we need is radical redistribution and community reparations from the institutions that continue to profit off our stories and our lives. And we also need a seat at the table so that we can propose actual practicable solutions like homefulness, like Wood Street Commons, like Etna Street, like all of these houseless and poor and Black and brown indigenous communities that are actually lifting up solutions. But again, it's important to keep us othered, separated, and talked about without, so that the profit-making machine of institutional knowledge creation and then institutional corporate jobs and then institutional media and on and on and on can be held together by the, the aristocracy, aristocracy as I call it, but also more importantly, the land stealers and the wealth hoarders. And so I caution people as well in this work that even if there's pseudo-inclusion and they're letting us in a little bit, when push comes to shove, intellectual property is the only property us poor people have. So I also want to say to everybody on this call as well, if you use any of the words that I say anyway, please credit them back to this poverty scholar, because that is all we got. And it's really easy to opt us and deconstruct us and create products about us without us as well. It's one of the other reasons, unfortunately, which I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing, but Poor Magazine had to create Poor Press so that we could actually create our own curriculum. As my brother Leroy calls it, we tried to go to Puke University and UC Berkeley and all of these places, and they wouldn't publish our work. It's too messy. It's not, linguistically dominated well enough. On and on the list goes. So it's important for us to actually recognize that our self-determination is actually our liberation education, and that's decolonization in action. Not begging, the institution to allow us to have a crumb, because they're never going to really give us any more than a crumb. And even if they do, then we're going to become one of them. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing unless we take it completely back. But I know that Stanford and UCLA and UC Berkeley and Columbia and all of these spaces and places are resting on so much stolen and gentrified land that the first thing that needs to happen with all of them is land back, period. Which is one of the things that we actually promoted and presented in the UNTOUR. We do these things called Stolen Land Hoarded Resources UNTOUR that we did at UC Berkeley, demanding that the ancestors were returned to Karina's people, demanding that the Move Africa ancestors be returned from so-called Harvard University to the relatives who lost them. Demanding, not asking. Because if we're going to be talking about inclusion, we need to be talking about recognition and not an acknowledgement. No disrespect to the people who are just getting into the world of understanding this and do an acknowledgement. I'm not trying to hate. It's a calling in, not a calling out. I believe we've all been lied to in capitalism. It's very important that we're lied to. But the other piece around that is that we make and demand a commitment. We demand a commitment to land back and Black land return and ancestor return and sacred site retrieval and honoring. And we already know that these campuses are sites for all that. But let me get a little bit into the work we do with young people. Because to close up, people, I want to say about Poverty Scholarship is that we as houseless and poor and Black and brown Indigenous people at Poor Magazine have actually created our own school. It's called People School. And I urge anybody on here and any of the students and any of the students of life, poverty scholar or folks with race and class privilege, to consider coming to that 2-day seminar, degentrification, decolonization seminar, because what we help you do is unlearn the lies of capitalism and as well heal from the multitude, the multiverse of colonial education lies that has us all capitalized. The next seminar is the last weekend of January. And you can find out more by going to www.poormagazine.org/education. And we have our own curriculum. And we teach through theater and storytelling and prayer. As poverty scholars, we don't give you a 30-page thesis paper that gets into our digital trash can. We give you lessons from life on survival and thrival, but more importantly, on decolonial liberation. so that we can actually create real solutions together as privileged and unhoused people, as housed and unhoused people, as settler colonizer and colonized. Because really, that's all we can do, especially with the colonial monster, the cracker monster coming into town, right? We have to. We have to get closer. We have to work deeper on our come unite. Okay. But having said that, I want to go on the note of the colonial cracker monster. I want to go into our youth scholars a little bit. And, by the way, there's all kinds of books. I'm going to do a little shameless plug. Poor Press is a poor people's press where we publish the books of poor and houseless people, and 100% of the proceeds goes to them. And then we also publish anthologies like How to Not Call the Police Ever, The Homefulness Handbook, Survival Guide Through COVID-19 and the Pandemic Called Poverty, and many more. And there's Sister Lori Herrera and Crip Hop Nation and Auntie Francis and Angel Hearts on many, many other beautiful books here. But having said that, and all of the proceeds of the anthologies go to build homefulness, a homeless people's solution to homelessness. But what I wanted to bring out is some of the work that we do with children. So we have a school called Decolonize Academy. And it's not called that just because that might be a cute name. First of all, my mama's name is Dee, and so it's spelled with 2 Ds. In deep respect and a deep bow to my Afro-Boricua ghetto scholar who barely made it out alive, of orphanages and torture homes in North Philly, and struggled her entire life. And who, at age 11, I became houseless with. And entered into the underground economic strategies that all us poor people do, and specifically poor families led by poor women. So I want to lift up all the poor women, specifically all across Mama Earth, who keep on keeping on no matter what. There's this concept of resilience, and I always challenge it because I think it's a beautiful catchphrase. I think us poor folks put on our shoes and clothes and keep it moving, because what the hell else are we going to do? But please don't call it something, to me anyway. I don't know about resilience. That just means I survived a shit ton of trauma that should never have been put on anybody's body, and certainly not anybody's mama. So sitting with that prayer and recognizing that Mama Dee's dream was homefulness while we were sleeping in the backseat of hoopties and in doorways and bus shelters, one of her original visions was Decolonize Academy. She didn't call it that, but it was a school that actually honored the experience of children in poverty instead of what capitalism does. And I think any of the educators on here who work with children know what I'm talking about. What capitalism does, which is shame a child openly for their poverty, which is a very important thing to do, because in capitalism we all have to be ashamed if we're poor. If we don't have access to occupied and stolen land, if we don't have 3 or 5 or 9 cars when we only need 1, if we don't have a condominium and a vacation home when we only need 1, we're put under a space of somehow we haven't made it. And that needs to be seeded very early. It needs to be born and bred in, which is why in colonial education, they don't teach about poverty ever. And if it's discussed or alluded to in a space of shame, in a space of othering, in a space of, again, there's something wrong with that family. So it's pathologized and criminalized. low key, of course. And oftentimes what happens, if at all it is discussed, is it's discussed within a savior industrial complex mentality. Let's go feed the homeless people, or let's go give some coats to the homeless people, like we're a frickin' tribe. When in fact, in most of the unified school districts today, San Francisco Unified, 53%, Oakland Unified, 38%. It's actually gone up to 42. 53 and 42% of the children are houseless or housing insecure. And if you think about those numbers, that's almost half, if not half, or more than half. And yet, poverty isn't taught to children, period. Or again, it's taught in this very depersonified way, like, maybe something in history, like the bread lines or the Depression. We don't have anything like that today. Oh, God, no. All those people waiting in line for their food on Thursday at Sliding Scale Cafe. Well, that's not the same. And on the list goes. We already know. So the urgency within a colonial education is to obfuscate and shame and build a kind of wall around poverty and homelessness, that it is in fact the other. And so then you have children going to school, like me and many more, absolutely terrified if someone found out that, God forbid, they were the homeless child. Oftentimes beat up mercilessly, and evaye to Jose, a 14-year-old boy who took his own life in occupied Muwekma, Ohlone Land, aka San Jose, because he was bullied mercilessly and made to feel ashamed, you see, for something that he and his family had absolutely no control over. And even if they did, who cares? It was his condition of his family. But you see, the children had been so beautifully capitalized that to them was a reason to make a child feel absolutely ashamed. And similarly, Jose took it in, embodied that shame, because that is all he had been taught. So in Decolonize Academy, was Mama's dream to create a different kind of a school. And what we do in Decolonize, most of our children are houseless, formerly houseless, have dealt with poverty or different kinds of racism or bullying. They're Black, brown, indigenous children coming out of low, no income and different communities. And homefulness is an indigenous organizing model. So I also want to lift up for a second here that decolonial education, by design, means that it is not just an education that's age grade separated and only for certain people. That's one of the most important parts about understanding what a decolonial education means. These institutions of higher learning, these so-called high schools and middle schools and elementary schools and kindergarten, as we teach all of the folks to come to People School, are in and of themselves spaces of capitalism. That is not the village in any way. All of our ancestors and our communities taught together. And this is what we do. We work together, we teach together. And that isn't to say we're some cutesy hippie commune. That's bullshit too. Children need to be protected above and beyond. Everybody. And my mama was, as a survivor in her tiny body at 2 years old, of over 300 times of molestation from being in these torture homes. She was absolutely a survivor, and her point in life was to make sure that children were protected because she was an unprotected child. But one of the ways that you have children being unprotected is in these age grade separated schools. But that's entrenched, you see, in a colonial education, because we're setting people up for the separation nation. Let's not get it twisted. They're all connected. So in the vision of Decolonized Academy, no child is uneldered. No child is uneldered. No child is left alone. And it's a small school setting. And I understand that most of our children in poverty are in these unified school districts. So I do what I can, as much as I can, to get into school districts. But reason I'm showing this book right now is this is one of many children's books that we do that introduces poverty, introduces a houseless protagonist as a different protagonist for children to see because they don't see themselves and they intentionally don't. And so one of the ways that we can push into a colonial education is through inserting a different narrative about poverty and homelessness. Similarly, and I think it's really important, is that you can't teach lies to children. They're way too smart. And the colonial education teaches covert lies under the guise of history, under the guise of anthropology and English. And some of the teachers, and I have all these different things in my head because there's so many experiences I've had, but one of them is when you have a teacher of color who's trying to be conscious with their young people, they oftentimes get shut down and shut out. If they refuse to be a mandated reporter, which is another space of racist, classist, ableist, state terror, that's a whole other thing that we teach on, and I don't have time to go into that now, but suffice it to say, if they push back on that designation for elders or children, they're also oftentimes risk firing, losing their job, losing their economy. So it's a really interesting way how the system of colonial education keeps the story in, right? And keeps it tightly wrapped in their bundle of bullshit. And having said that, I also still believe that Black and Brown, Indigenous, and disabled teachers need to get into the classroom. So if anybody is hearing me in this webinar today that hears that, please take that road. In addition to all the other ways that we can infiltrate to liberate, which is, these spaces of law, of the settler colonial lies, law and medicine and all that other ish. It needs more of us, not less, right? But having said that, the other important thing is teaching truth, right? And so I'm going to share a little bit of this beautiful video, and I hope that you're going to be able to hear it. Because the first way we introduced homefulness was visioned by our children as the next 7 generations and beyond.
The time is now. Tell me about your project. Project is about a cafe and going to paint the houses. We made a barnyard made out of hay, and then we made a garden with like trees. The reason why we have like houses is to like make our own little homes, but they're little, not big. But when we do more homes, like for evictions and stuff, it's like show how it is like not being hopefulness, real solution to houselessness. Sweat equity, permanent co-housing, education, arts, micro business, and social change project for landless, houseless, and formerly houseless youth, adults, and elders across Pachamama. Homefulness, una solución verdadera para los desamparados. Ayuda mutua, covivienda permanente, educación, arte, micronegocios, proyectos.
Landless families and revolutionary donors across Pachamama. Land stolen, never given back. Crumbs thrown, not feeling that. It's time for hopefulness.
So that's just a little bit of that. And one of the beautiful things that we did is the youth over 3 years, actually, 3 different sessions of Family Project, which was the precursor to Decolonize Academy before there was a homefulness. Now Decolonize Academy actually has 12 students and is happening at Homefulness in Uchun, where 23 relatives are living, formerly houseless relatives are living in rent-free forever housing. But in its original dream, it was just the children who created, and they created the vision, because we also need to lift up the vision and the solutions of our children. Similarly, though, here we are doing this work, and I want to share a little bit of what truth education creates.
I am Zaire Hughes. I am counsel for the plaintiff Tyree Nichols family. Today I'm going to be proving the reasoning of prosecution towards the officers Haley, Bean, and Smith. On January 7th, Tyree Nichols, a 29-year-old black man, was fatally injured by 5 black police officers in Memphis, Tennessee. The officers were all members of the police department, MPD, Scorpion Unit. They pulled Nichols from his car before pepper spraying and tasering him. The 14th Amendment. Every person born in the U.S. is guaranteed equal protection under the law. This also was broken. In conclusion, the defendants, Officer Bean and Smith, should be charged with wrongful death of Tyree Nichols.
I am Paris Cato, counsel for the plaintiff Kiefer Edwards. He was a respectful tenant. He paid his rent on time. He never caused any trouble and even took care of his neighborhood stray animals. My client got evicted due to his landlord disappearing after years of collecting rent. He is currently houseless. Kiefer had tenant rights. I'm going to prove he had tenant rights. Here are some of his tenant rights that were breached. The law states that terminating a month-to-month tenancy, most states require a 30-day notice. My client never had a notice. For eviction, notice periods can range from 3 to 60 days, depending on the state. He should have had the right to a fair trial. The 6th Amendment applies to my client, which guarantees the right to a speedy public trial, right to a lawyer. I am more than sure my client did not receive a lawyer. I believe the 14th Amendment, which states every person born in the U.S. is a citizen, promising equal protection under law, also applies to my client because he didn't get any justice. Shouldn't nobody have to be homeless because the shady cracker decided not to do their job? It hurts me because he was paying his rent, and as far as I know, there are no reasons why the landlord, quote unquote, ghosted him. I strongly believe my client should get housing back with the first 5 months of utilities paid for. A payoff from the company of $6,000. An apology card will also be mandatory.
My name is Kai T. I am a counsel for defendant Marcellus Williams. My client Marcellus Williams was convicted in 2001 of killing former newspaper reporter Felicia Gill. I am aimed to prove that Marcellus Williams was innocent. Mr. Williams spent 23 years of his life on death row. He was executed on September 24th, 2024 for 1998 killing that he consistently maintained he did not commit. There was DNA testing done that proved that he was not the source of the DNA left on the alleged weapon. Marcellus Williams was a good man. While he was incarcerated, he was studying Islamic teachings, acting as a spiritual leader for fellow Muslim inmates. He was also a poet. The Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states that everybody has the right to due process and the law. I believe the Fifth Amendment would apply to my client because my client didn't receive due process in his case.
So I'll stop it there just because it goes on and there's more children, but I will tell you that again, these youth scholars, they can save the world. They know what's up, and they've all been taught the truth. And yeah, it's the hard truth. Teaching a young person about the disgusting capital death, so-called death penalty, and the lynching of an African descendant man, and Ibaye to Marcellus, to the struggles of police terror. But you know, we have to get a civics class, right? A civics class. We're a registered homeschool, R4 registration. And we offer a diploma to these young people. So we have to teach the colonial-ish, right? But like I always tell my my co-sons and co-daughters, my nieces and nephews in the school, we cannot, and Ibaye to Malcolm, we cannot overthrow the system unless we overstand the system, right? And so we have to get very, very clear about what those constitutional laws pretend to do and don't do. And how if there really was a quote unquote 14th Amendment, Marcellus Williams would still be here. Oh, Ibaye. And so we cry and we learn and we don't talk down to children, and we also recognize that they're children. As my mama said, I don't argue with children. So there's that too. We recognize that children have their own knowledge, and they also have a knucklehead attitude, and we have to have a family council and stop everything to get them to take accountability for some BS that they pull. Don't get it twisted. Our children are like all the children. But recognizing their beautifulness and the struggle of growing up and holding all of those things from a decolonial lens so that we together can actually take care of Mama Earth. That's a decolonial education at this point. And we do it for all ages. And so I urge people to check out People School. We need help all the time. There's a whole lot more I could say, but I know you guys have another program and I also have to go somewhere too. I love you, Cheryl. Love you, Kim. There's so many good people on here. And you can reach us, www.poormagazine.org. We do need help with everything that we do. And we also couldn't do this badass liberation work led by poor and houseless people without radical redistribution, without folks who have race, class, and formal education privilege, radically redistributing some of your excess resources. We're holding so many relatives now in occupied Devangar, LA. They're trying to build their own homefulness. We're working in Yalamu, Frisco, and right here in Uchun, we're trying to build 12 more units and another campus of Decolonize Academy. So please come check us out. Please support us. Omateo.
Mateo, thank you, Tiny. Always amazing. Wonderful. It's always a blessing to be in your company, and appreciate you being here. And what a blessing to those children who are learning the truth.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Tiny. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Don't leave because we have 5 more speakers. I see Kim, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi. Tiny probably left already, but thank you, Tiny. I love the Academy School of Youth Journalism. And I wanted to say this when that gentleman was on before Tiny, but so too bad that he left. And what I'm gonna say is not very nice, but it's my truth. And the thing is, for me, the Sierra Club is nothing more than a box checking diversity.
Mm.
And it has a long history of white privilege, recreation, and environmentalism. It truly does. And in 2020, after the brutal death of George Floyd, they finally decided to acknowledge their hero worship of racist guru, as Tiny would say, conservationist. And so and as me, as a California native whose ancestors lived in Yosemite and the surrounding area, we had been calling the Sierra Club out for decades about and to acknowledge the harm that John Muir inflicted on us. So I just wanted to bring that up, that when we're talking about education and the environment and climate change, that because we're all working to steward the land and look at land back and all of these things. And so in a way, that for me, the Sierra Club is triggering. It's disingenuous. I'm just gonna put it out there. And yes, I'm sure he had some great slides and all of that, but I don't buy into reading all that colonial jargon and the grant writing industrial complex and all of that. So, but I just wanted to be real that I'm very suspect about the Sierra Club. So that's what I had to say. And I got to get going myself.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Kim. That's your truth. Some of our truths that's just the truth, so that it is what it is. Thank you for sharing that. So we're going to take a 5-minute break right now. Jed, I hope you all are here. I apologize for all the confusion about the time changes, but it looks like you're going to start where you were supposed to start. So thank you. And so come back, don't leave. Go, relieve yourselves, get a sip of water, some more coffee, which I need to do. And we'll be back in like 5 more minutes. So at 5:25, we'll be right back. Thank you, everyone, for being patient and hanging in there with us. Okay, we still have 3 more minutes. But I just wanted to again thank everyone for being here. So far, it's been an amazing morning, even though we had a couple people sick and not able to show up. The information given has been amazing. And I'm really happy that we were able to do this morning, even though we had a few hiccups. And yeah, you never know. Things just happen to work out the way they work out. So you have to be flexible in this times. Ugh, who knows what's going to happen in 2025? It's already started out so significant, I'll say that. And like in January 1st, I started saying 2025, get ready, be prepared. That is so true. Who knew? But yeah, we have to get prepared. So everybody, I guess Fatima, are you introducing the next speaker? All right, well, I'll let you have it. So thank you everyone for being here and staying. And our amazing student Fatima is going to introduce our next speakers. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Our next speaker is Jed Terrence Lee for Wellness and Environmental Justice Community Engagement Manager, speaking on the value-driven education at UC Berkeley, empowering climate leaders of the next generation, alongside with many UC Berkeley students that he will be also introducing. Thank you.
Thanks, Fatima. Thanks, Cheryl. It's great to be here. I will just say thank you, Tiny, as well, for her presentation. I think I was on that walk around campus at UC Berkeley, demanding the repatriation of Indigenous remains, and that was really powerful. And it's always been inspirational to learn from Tiny and Cheryl's and everyone's work. So thank you for being here. Yeah, my name is Jed Lee, and as described, I am a professional staffer at the Student Environmental Resource Center at CERC, and I'm really excited to present to y'all today with 4 of my colleagues and amazing students and staff as well, to talk about how we approach being at an institution like UC Berkeley, how we try and grapple with its history as a land grab institution, institution of white supremacy and a lot of problematic histories. But I think that through this presentation, you'll be able to see how many of us are working to kind of be subversive to that. So without further ado, I'm gonna I'll let everyone else introduce themselves. And we're all calling in and around the East Bay, Huichin land. So I'm grateful for hearing from Karina and everyone as well. And then now I'll pass it to Shreya. You can just go in order.
Hi everyone, my name is Shreya Chaudhary. I'm a senior at UC Berkeley and a Climate Action Fellow for the Student Environmental Resource Center, and I'm studying environmental science and geography, and I'll pass it off to Keshwant.
Hi everyone, my name is Keshwant Paligola. I'm currently a junior at UC Berkeley. I'm a Climate Action Engagement Fellow along with Shreya at CERC, and I'm studying environmental economics and policy and data science. And yeah, I'll pass it off to Alina.
Hi everyone, my name is Lena Sarate. I'm a PhD student in the Energy and Resources group and the Farm Worker and Climate Justice Associate with CERC, and we'll hand it off.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Sharon Della Ponte. I'm one of the other professional staff members at CERC, and I serve as CERC's director.
Great. We're super excited to be here with you today, and yeah, a wealth of kind of knowledge and experience working in education field and with students of the next generation. So I'll pass it to Alina to get us started.
Yes, thank you so much. So it is my pleasure to virtually welcome you all to the CERC space and introduce you to some of the amazing work that we do with CERC. To begin, some background, if you want to go to the next slide. So CERC is a collaborative space to strengthen the collective effectiveness of the sustainability community by providing resources for students to actualize their visions of a more equitable, socially just, and resilient future. And so some of the many things that CERC strives to do is, one, provide institutional memory and leadership at UC Berkeley, to offer educational programming and skills-based trainings for students, to cultivate a space for civil discourse, which is something that I think we're generally lacking at this moment in time, and also to communicate resources and opportunities. And so over the course of the presentation, we're hoping to share some of our values and some of the many projects that we do that kind of are fostering what CERC here strives to do. And with that, I'll pass it off back to you, Jed.
This is our space, and then I think Sharon will talk a little more about everything else.
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone for being here. Really excited to get the opportunity to talk about our work at UC Berkeley. And so the way that we really wanted to share our work is to connect it to our 5 core values that we have at CERC. So all of us will share a little bit more of those values, what those values mean to us, and how we live those values within our work, programming, and our full and whole selves. So if you can go to the next slide, just a little bit more background of CERC. As Alina mentioned, we have we're a campus central hub that strives to support students in their visions of what a climate just and socially just world can look like. We were founded in 2012 by 3 transfer students who worked then at that time with another full-time staffer to create what is now known as the Student Environmental Resource Center. Our center was modeled after other amazing centers on campus that also exist at other universities and colleges across the nation, such as the Gender Equity Resource Center and the Multicultural Community Center. We saw, the students then saw at that time how special and important and critical it was for students to have community space to come together around shared values and shared identities, and notice that there was a lack of a space like this for students who cared about climate and cared about environmental issues. And so CERC was founded under that guide and vision of creating a space for students to come together to really be able to have more cohesion and communications amongst each other. And so fast forward to where we are now. We're a majority student-led and student-run organization with 36 student staff and 3 full-time staff. And our values that we're going to go into detail were co-created by staff and community members. We literally sent out like a list of values, emailed people who are our staff and our community members and asked, what values comes to you when you think of CERC? This was part of our first strategic planning initiative where we were realizing we needed to have a framework and wanted to document what are CERC's core values. And so all of the values that you hear about today were created by students and really do continue to represent all of the work that we strive to do and that we are doing. Next slide, please. And so to kick us off, I'm going to talk about conscious impact, which is our first value. Conscious impact, as we define it as our value, CERC exercises a mindful decision-making in its efforts to achieve environmentally and socially just outcomes. Next slide, please. And so when we think of conscious impact, it comes in a lot of different ways in our work. Something that I like to refer back to is this quote that comes from the book Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown, and it's one of her key principles that she uses to kind of talk about organizing work, and it's what happens at the small scale impacts the large scale. I think for our work at CERC, working at a large institution like Berkeley, it is really important to recognize that the work that we can do can really have an impact on our local community and local efforts, and those local efforts can really create a ripple effect either in the surrounding communities or across the state or even across the world. And we see this happen all the time in our world. When we think of the university Palestine encampments that happened that started on the East Coast and how that had a ripple effect across the US and even outside of this country. It just shows that what happens at the small scale can really impact the large scale. And this is a huge and important framework of the things that we strive to do at CERC and making sure that we all recognize that we do have an impact, or we can have an impact on our campus, and that might even lead to more. Next slide, please. And so part of that mindful decision-making that was bolded in the original CERC value definition is we try to also do this by making sure that our work is intersectional and intentional. And for us, that means that we want to continue to evolve and adapt our work and programs to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students and that we're meeting the needs of this world and of what we're really trying to create as a more socially and environmentally just world. And so we want to, with everything we do, ensure that our work is intersectional, intentional in the planning, programming, and really reflective of the current times and the current demands that call for us. Next slide, please. And so one example that we have to kind of talk about our conscious impact just to hone down a little bit, is we've created a CERC purchasing guideline. So CERC also offers opportunities to students via funding through grants. And one of our funding streams is called the Eco Fund, where students can apply for funding for their programs, events, projects that they're working on. And we try to approve as many applications as we can with our funding and really support students. And with this, we created a purchasing guideline to provide guidelines for our eco fund that really match our organization ethics. And so that shows, a list of goods, supplies, food, or services that we actually will approve and recommend that students use. So things like not purchasing things off Amazon was an important value for us to make sure that we were highlighting and to really support local businesses and to help strengthen our local economies. And so something like this, I think, had maybe in like a small impact in the grand scheme of things, but it's really us showing our conscious impact in terms of, us putting money where we really want to support and encouraging students to do the same. And I'll pass it off to our next speaker to talk more about community engagement, our second value.
Yes, the second value is community engagement, and us at CERC really believe that in order to foster a sense of belonging and to develop individuals into change makers, into the leaders of the next generation, CERC works to build and strengthen relationships and interpersonal ties through deliberate, sustained outreach and open communication to the environmental community. So if you think about UC Berkeley, it's a huge campus. There's 45,000 students, 20,000 staff and faculty. There's a ton of people, and students especially are coming from all over the state, the nation, and even the world. We have, I think, like 95 different countries represented in the students who come to UC Berkeley. So it's a really huge and overwhelming place for, to come, especially if you don't know anyone or you're not from the area. And that can be really overwhelming, and recognizing that the demographic that has the highest rate of adjustment syndrome, or like having a sudden change, is actually college students when they move away from home, from their families, and like start in a new area, right? And just broadly, and that kind of is harder for students of different intersectional identities. So us at CERC really have a huge value on outreaching to the environmental community, to those who are interested in environmental work, and kind of creating a smaller campus in such a large area, right? So people can feel like there's this place for them. So we often host an open house in our space that allows students to meet different clubs, to connect with each other and meet friends, so that they can find their place on campus. And then another big program of that is the CERC membership program, in which often first or second year students can come join our team, staff members who lead these teams, to one, build the community and have a space to connect, but also around issues like zero waste, around equity in the climate movement, around professional development and building skills, and planning events, working on ways for students to like transition into their careers on campus. We also believe in the value of finding support as you navigate this big life change and institution. So we have an environmentorship program, which pairs newer students with either upperclassmen or actual professionals in the environmental field, for them to be able to connect and also gain access to knowledge and resources and guides for how to navigate campus, how to navigate getting a job in the environmental field. So that's been a very successful program for us. And then really, reflecting on the institution itself and where it is, again, people come from all over to come to campus, and we don't want them to just remain on the 5x8 block, area that is campus. We want them to break down the walls of the ivory tower and connect with community, find a sense of belonging of where they are, the beautiful East Bay Area in California. And so through that, we have a program called New Toward Nature Education and Wellness Together, where we are able to bring, students who also haven't had many opportunities to connect with land and nature and go outside and learn about where they are in the world. So we plan and facilitate trips that also focus on education around indigenous sovereignty and reflection and thinking about each person's relationship to their own bodies, health, mind, and how we can do that in community together. So through those trips, we've also paired that with traveling to local community organizations. So on the left, we did a trip to the Amamutsan Land Trust in the peninsula and did a volunteer day with them. And then on the right, we visited Planning Justice in Oakland and getting these students off of campus into the communities, learning from amazing organizations doing work on the ground, and so that they can shape their careers and education so that they can be in service of groups in the future. And then one thing that we've also been really proud to be a part of is Mobilize Berkeley in partnership with Cheryl and CEMTF and other organizations, but really focused on recognizing, that the climate crisis is overwhelming and these issues are overwhelming, but we can work on them together in community and process those emotions. So we've planned various healing gathering events where we bring students out into the community, out to different places in the Berkeley and Bay Area, and so that they can hear from people who are not, 18 to 22, but people of various generations, races, classes, and diverse community. And yeah, it's been a really meaningful part for students to really find community on campus and off campus in the Bay Area.
Yeah, and another value that we really hold dear to us is student sovereignty, and CERC really honors student agency by providing support for students to create their own self-governed sustainability programming. And we see a really great example of that on the next slide with the West Coast Climate Gathering. So it's a really great example of students being able to create their own movements and coalesce around a shared vision. And the West Coast Climate Gathering actually just happened a couple months ago in October. So it's really great to see over 80 students across 25 different colleges all over the West Coast be able to lead protests, teach-ins, and community gatherings discussing a wide range of topics. Some of those include solidarity with Palestine, advocating for a fossil-free UC, and many other really powerful campaigns. So a lot of the pictures that we see there are of those events, and it was really great to see a shared vision among students in that event as well. And at UC Berkeley, as we've mentioned before, the Circ space is a really great way for students to make all these events happen. So on the next slide, we see a bunch of pictures of us at staff meetings, at open house events like Jed was mentioning. And as students, we're really given the agency to make all these events happen because of the community and the people that we find at Circ and the Circ space specifically. Many of our staff meetings are student-led and shaped by the things that students want to talk about, and a lot of our events in the Circ space as well are also designed by students, like the open house, where environmental clubs and organizations can showcase their work. And ultimately, a lot of the action that we implement within our community starts with the initial discussions and meetings at the Circ space. And that's really only possible because of the inviting and welcoming place that it is. And if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and lastly, we really want to emphasize that the Circ space is not just an academic structure, but it's truly built on creativity. As we talk about value-driven education and empowering the climate leaders of the next generation, so many of our climate solutions should be based on the creativity and design of our students, and they should similarly be given the agency, the resources, and the support among their communities to engage with climate education and climate movements. And yeah, we just have a word cloud here on some of the main words and ideas that are really shape CERC and the student work that's going on. So really hope to continue that in the present and in the future as well.
And that is an excellent segue into our next value, which is bold imagination. So CERC provides the necessary resources for creative problem solving to encourage students to question the status quo, interrogate the current realm of possibilities and barriers, and apply their ideas through sustainability projects and initiatives. So in the context of climate education, Jed, if you wouldn't mind, there we go. This really means creating spaces and opportunities for radical creativity and activism, as well as supporting highly motivated students whose mission extends beyond the confines of the UC Berkeley campus and community, because climate change as a global problem needs to extend beyond our campuses and our academic communities. And so while this value could be applied to any and every project that my colleagues have shared so far, I wanted to highlight two more. The first is the leaflet, which I won't get into too much, but is really an arts-based environmental activism collective within CERC. They do amazing work with different arts mediums, articles, and blogs around a range of different topics related to climate and climate justice. But the second one is one that's very close to my heart, which is the Farm Worker and Climate Justice Project. So as the first PhD student staff member in CERC and as the first Farm Worker and Climate Justice Associate, I have been really fortunate as a longtime farm worker, justice advocate, and environmental scientist to be given the opportunity to cultivate this project within CERC, which promotes the unfortunately radical idea that farm workers are climate experts and deserve to be included in conversations about sustainable transitions and adaptations in our food systems. And so we've been working to foster knowledge exchanges between UC Berkeley and farm worker communities in Washington State, California, and Florida by elevating farm worker knowledge, expertise, and adaptation around climate change in their communities of origin and their work and in their lives more broadly through oral histories. And we will be working over the next semester to share this knowledge with the broader community, because we have a lot to learn from farm workers and we are all dependent on them for the food that we eat. So this is just some of the examples of how we're using bold imagination to really change the way that we're looking at climate justice and climate issues. And with that, I'll pass it to Shreya.
Thank you. So one of the core values that guides a lot of the student action at CERC is equity and inclusion, where CERC provides environmental and social justice programming and resources to create a space that values the perspectives and narratives of marginalized students. And on the next slide, one of the new projects we launched is the Decolonial Environmental Hub. So as some background, I started a course at Berkeley called Decolonizing Environmentalism, and there was a lot of student and community interest in the content of this course. So in order to extend and unite the work of this course in similar spaces on campuses, we launched this hub that focuses on the intersection between decolonization and environmentalism to further environmental justice, both within the local community and beyond it as well. We've had several guest speakers and events as part of this hub and course. One example of an event we hosted was Congo Rising in October, where we hosted Indigenous Congolese activists in collaboration with Friends of the Congo while they were on their US tour. We've also had events with the Black Panther Alumni Network, the Sogorethe Land Trust, and alumni from the Third World Liberation Front. And we will be having some events upcoming this semester, for example, one in sovereignty in Palestine and potentially an ancestral herbalism workshop. We also will be hosting a retreat for BIPOC environmentalists called Lessons from the Land, and we will be having coalition meetings within campus to focus on this intersection among various groups that are working within this field. Additionally, we have an archive of past environmental justice action that has taken place both within the local community and also the links between Berkeley and countries and communities outside as well. And on the next slide, Another one of our projects is focused on building equity within UC climate policy. We have met with various stakeholder groups and policy influencers within the UC community in order to ensure that equity is at the forefront of UC climate policy, and especially Indigenous and student voices are being included within discussions on sustainability. We've previously held discussions on the DEIJ 2025 plan for the UC-wide climate policy, and we are also working on furthering environmental justice within Berkeley's curriculum and classes. So for instance, we're working with faculty to design an interdisciplinary environmental justice major, and we are also advocating for a mandatory environmental literacy requirement. Some other environmental justice programs that we have is, as Judd mentioned, Nature Education and Wellness Together that promotes outdoor access for minoritized students. We also have a Tea for Thought Cafe where we are raising awareness on colonial global supply chains within the tea industry. We have also held environmental justice trainings in partnership with the Student Government's Eco Office, and we have Climate Justice Week annually, which is a week that is filled with events and programming related to centering environmental justice. And we've held a climate justice fair in the past.
Great. Yeah. And so those are 5 of our values. And I think that 2 more quotes really emphasize that. So yes, I'll read the first one. So every moment is an organizing opportunity, every person a potential activist, and then every minute a chance to change the world, by Dolores Huerta. And that's been on our wall ever since we moved into our space. And so every student sees that every time they come. And then also on our wall, it's not pictured in this picture, but on all of our Zoom backgrounds is the hummingbird. And so I'll play the video and then I'll pass it off to the students to close us out. But the story of the hummingbird in shaping like the work that we do at CERC to tie in all of these values together. So hopefully you can hear once it starts playing.
We are constantly being bombarded by problems that we face, and sometimes we can get completely overwhelmed. The story of the hummingbird is about this huge forest being consumed by a fire. All the animals in the forest come out and they are transfixed as they watch the forest burning, and they feel very overwhelmed, very powerless, except this little hummingbird. It says, I'm going to do something about the fire. So it flies to the nearest stream, takes a drop of water, and puts it on the fire and goes up and down, up and down, up and down, as fast as it can. In the meantime, all the other animals, much bigger animals, like the elephant with a big trunk, could bring much more water. They are standing there helpless, and they are saying to the hummingbird, what do you think you can do? You're too little. This fire is too big. Your wings are too little. And you're big, so small, you can only bring a small drop of water at a time. But as they continue to discourage it, it turns to them without wasting any time and tells them, I am doing the best I can. And that to me is what all of us should do. We should always feel like a hummingbird. I may feel insignificant, but I certainly don't want to be like the animals watching as the planet goes down the drain. I will be a hummingbird. I will do the best I can.
Great. So yeah, we love that story by Wangari Maathai, and always try to bring it into our work. And finally, I'll pass it to Shreya and Keshwan to close this out.
Thank you, Jed, for sharing the video. At CERC, we deeply value the story of the hummingbird in order to guide our work and remind us that despite the climate crisis being on such an impossible magnitude, there's still so much that we can do on an individual level. And even though it might seem small, at least we're doing the best that we can.
Yeah, and thank you, Jed and Shreya. And yeah, I think as we close, I really resonate as a student with the quote that Jed mentioned by Dolores Huerta in the video, that we're reminded of each time that we walk into the Cirque space. And I think as students, that's ultimately what we're here to do. And I think the Cirque values capture those exact sentiments. And as students, I think we're truly here to consciously impact the climate conversation in our own communities and spaces. And being at Cirque, I've met with and worked with so many incredible people with so many amazing and diverse perspectives, and all of whom are on the screen right now. And only further learn how nuanced the climate issue is and how many different avenues it can be tackled across. And I think it's really important to engage with our communities and shine a light on the underrepresented and marginalized voices that aren't always invited to the table. And as students, it's truly our responsibility to boldly imagine a cleaner future and more just future for the climate leaders of today and the next generation. So as we've said, like throughout the morning today and afternoon, that's really the work that we're trying to do. And it's so inspiring to see all the work that's being done. And as students and in our own spaces, it's really important to do that work. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening. And I think on the next slide, we have some links and stuff to stay connected. And yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in.
Whoops. Thank you. I'm wearing my Cirque hat now. Thank you. That was amazing. And thank you for being so flexible with your time. And, I appreciated you before, but now I appreciate you so much more because I see how more amazing you are. And I thank you for your partnership, Cirque, with Ann Newt. We had a bio blitz last year. We've done so many community healing gatherings, which all of you were a part. And yeah, I'll just never forget. I'm probably gonna mispronounce your name, Shreya. Um, and I meant to ask Jed to have you do this, but it's too late now, but another time. If you could bless us with another vocal experience. This woman has an amazing voice besides everything else, that one day you all have to hear because it just made me cry both times. So anyway, we're at our end almost, and I'm not sure, but I was supposed to have a special guest. I don't know if that guest is available right now. You can just put your thumb up if that's true. My sister. And I want to thank everyone for being here. And I want to thank, everyone for being so flexible, because today we had 2 speakers call in sick. So that kind of set us off. We started a little late, and we didn't know how it was going to work out, but Tiny stepped in, and Helen stepped in to take up more time. And so that was really great. And my sister has her hand up. Go ahead, Lynette.
I just wanted to say my poor dad, he's not feeling well. None of his equipment is working. I'm calling him right now. I mean, he was fine listening, but he's not answering.
Okay, that's okay, my sister. We'll let that go, because it was like, my dad has been a professor in education sociology for 50 plus years. He's 96 years old. He still travels. He just retired at 93. So I wanted to, it was like, I cannot have this space and not offer my dad a few minutes to give us some words of wisdom, but that's not going to happen. So we're going to end on time. And I appreciate all of you for being here. I thank you, Jed. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Alina, Shreya, and Keshwan. Thank you, Tiny. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Karina. Thank you, Chenny. And thank you, Annie. and Fatima for being able to introduce the speakers this morning. And as always, I want to thank Jack and Karina, who have been in CEMTF since the very beginning and are still going strong. We're all volunteers. They're dedicated and committed, and I appreciate them so much. And, you know, my sister's here. Thank you, Lynette. And my husband's also here. So thank you, Robert, for being here. And thank you all for being here, because we're just trying to educate people. We're in some interesting times. We have 47 come 45 coming back as 47. So we have to be mindful of that and be careful from that. And you know, I'm praying that we can move away from fossil fuels and all the way it depletes the planet. Praying for unbought politicians and an end to greed, greed, corporate and otherwise. And praying for an end to racism and white supremacy, an end to wars, apartheid, colonization, and oppression. Praying for freedom in all the ways that we can, and you know, for Haiti, the Congo, Sudan, Yemen, and throughout the world. And praying for a better tomorrow and a free Palestine from the river to the sea. No two states, back to 48, living in peace, because only the Zionists refuse to live in peace without domination and control. And we have to remember, this is 2025. We have to be prepared and be ready. So get your go bag going, because when was that? Just last year, we had a tsunami warning in Berkeley. And my neighbor came up to me and said, "Hey, what are we going to do?" I'm like, well, they said it was going to stop at 7th Street. So I'm not really going to do much. But, you know, I guess we need to be prepared. And I wasn't ready. You know, I was like, oh, let me get ready now. Let me get dressed. But I grabbed my birth certificates. That's the only thing I could think of in that few minutes. But we have to get our go bags ready and be ready for what comes next, because you know, who knows what that will be. There's a lot of actions this weekend. Get out on the street if you can. And Happy New Year. And thank you again for being here. Thank you for donating. And we'll see you in March 21st, 9 a.m., which happens to be my 38th anniversary as well. We're going to have climate, youth, and seniors. So hope to see you then. Register now, donate if you can. And let's be part of the solution to rebuild this country after 47 and during 47 and to rebuild the countries where war has diminished their land. So have a blessed day, and thank you again for being here. Bye, y'all.